You can't say you want to be in a position of power or influence or authority if you don't want the responsibility that comes with it. Because you will be held to a higher standard. You will be held accountable and you will be scrutinized. And if you don't want that, then maybe you should rethink your goals. You see, I was reading the book of Exodus the other day, particularly the part about Moses where God asked him to speak to the rock to give the people water, and he struck the rock instead, just as he did in the past, and he struck it twice. And because of that, God told him, because you have disobeyed me, I am not going to let you go into the promised land with these people. He said, I will let you see it, but I am not allowing you to go into the promised land with the people. And I'm sitting here reading this, full transparency, okay? I'm sitting here reading this and I'm like, but God, that's not fair. Because in the book of Exodus, it talks about the people being enslaved by the Egyptians in Egypt, by Pharaoh. And then they were suffering so bad. They prayed to God and they asked him to deliver them from the Egyptians, deliver them from the slavery. God called Moses to be their leader and to lead them out of it. And in the process of them leaving Egypt and like from going from Egypt, slavery, to their promised land, the land of abundance, the land of milk and honey, they defiled and disobeyed God so many times. They turned away from him so many times, despite miracle after miracle, despite him coming through, despite him making a way out of no way. Every time there was the slightest minor inconvenience, they turned their backs on him and they started worshiping other gods, and they prayed to go back to Egypt, go back to slavery, because they did not trust God that much. And each time Moses pleaded to God on their behalf to spare those people, like, God, if you don't lead them out, the people, the Egyptians will say that you did not honor your word and you could not get them to the promised land. So on, so forth. Moses pleaded to God on their behalf so many times to save them, and God heard his cry and he pardoned them and he gave them another chance. And the one time Moses disobeyed, the one time, if there were other times, maybe I missed it, but the one time Moses disobeyed God, the one mistake, when God asked him to speak to the rock instead of striking the rock, because he struck it twice, God told him, you're not going into the promised land with them. I will show it to you, but you're not going with them. And I'm like, God, that's not fair. All of the chances you gave the Israelites, these people have defamed you, defiled you, worshipped other gods. All the chances you gave them while Moses was being obedient to you the entire time, of all the chances you gave to them, the one time Moses messes up, suddenly he's disqualified. Suddenly he has to die on the journey. He has to see the promised land that he would have gone to if he was obedient. And then he has to die and he doesn't get to go in because of one mess up. I'm reading it and I'm thinking that, and I'm like, I close my Bible and I'm like, okay, God, that doesn't seem fair to me. Help me understand this, because that just doesn't seem fair. Why is it that he was punished and like completely removed from the promised land because of that one mistake, despite you forgiving the Israelites so many times? And then I saw a sermon that broke it down. And I'm going somewhere with all of this. It's going to play into today's episode. I saw a sermon that broke it down by Jerry Flowers, and he said that the reason why Moses was disqualified for his disobedience that one time is because he was in a position of leadership. He was the one God called to lead these people into the promised land. He was the one that was supposed to set the example. He was the one that was supposed to be obedient. Granted, God was also teaching them obedience and trust in him, but Moses had the responsibility of leading them. And the thing is, if somebody who's leading you is messing up and they're not doing the right things and they're acting in poor integrity and poor character, are you going to follow them? And if they're a representation of God, are you going to think that God is a good God? That's exactly why I was atheist when I was in school, because I felt like the church people I was around painted a poor picture of God, so I turned away from God. And Moses had that responsibility, and because he dishonored that, he was disqualified from going into the promised land. He was the one called to lead them there. And when you are called to a position of leadership, you are held to higher standards than the people you are called to lead. They are looking at you. Yes, they might not be perfect, but they are looking at you regardless. You will still be held to high standards. And in the sermon, Jerry explained that how many times did God say, you know what? Forget these people, so to speak. I am not going to allow them to go into the promised land anymore. They have disobeyed me. They have worshipped other gods. I am not going to lead them into the promised land anymore. That's it. That's the end of the road. And then what did Moses do? He begged for God to change his mind, to give them another chance. And then the pastor said that, think about it this way. Sometimes there are people in our lives that we have to let go of in order to go to the next level. But we keep begging them to change. We keep trying to plead and bargain with them to change because we want them to stay so much. And you don't realize that them staying could lead to them having you disqualified from what you deserve in the long run, because their character was not meant to go there with you. They were not meant, they are not equipped to be able to handle that blessing or to be able to handle you in that successful season of your life, because they only know the traumatic, toxic side of you. And God is saying you have to let them go, and you are begging and pleading and trying to make room for them, trying to bring them along with you. But if you keep doing that, they will end up having you disqualified, just like Moses. Imagine the Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years. It should have taken, I think, 11 days or something like that? Forgive me, I forgot. But it should have taken a few days. It took 40 years because they were so disobedient. The generation that initially left Egypt had to die off before they could go. It took 40 years because that generation was so disobedient that it's their grandchildren that ended up going into the promised land. How long is it going to take you to get to where you want to go with you trying to drag the people who are not supposed to go with you? It could only require a month of your time and your consistency, but because you want to bring those people there with you, those people who will backstab you when you get there, now God has to wait until you find the strength to let these people go. You have to wait until you let them go, because they are not meant to go with you, and he loves you too much to make them go with you and then end up hurting you on the back end. When he said that, I was like, ooh, my edges. Because here I am thinking, oh, this isn't fair. And he's like, no, God told Moses, these people are not going. They're too disobedient. They're not going. And the reason Moses ended up striking the rock twice, by the way, is because right before that, he said something like, you foolish people, or whatever, you're so whatever. It's like they were complaining to him, and they were like just being very negative. They were just saying things like, oh, we're so thirsty. Did you bring us out of slavery? Did you bring us out of Egypt just to die of thirst in the wilderness? And he got so fed up of them that he let that cause him to lose control of his emotions, right? The lack of patience with them caused him to lose it, and then he just struck the rock, and then it didn't work, and he struck it again. You see what I'm saying? He lost his cool for the same reasons that God wanted to disqualify them to begin with. It's that same lack of faith. Is that same disobedience, is that same negative mindset, is that same complaining. God said, I'm not letting y'all go, and he begged for them to go. And that same attitude caused him to lose his cool and disqualified him from entering the promised land, granted with their grandchildren, because that generation was so bad. Shook. I was shook when he broke it down like that. I was like, that makes sense. Here I am thinking it wasn't fair, but it was like, no, he was in a position of leadership, and he begged for those people to go, so much so that it cost him the promised land. It cost him the promised land. Now, I'm not even talking about the letting people go part and all of that. That's another piece. That would be a whole separate episode. But today I'm focusing on the leadership piece. I'm focusing on the fact that your destiny, your promised land, so to speak, requires more of you. It requires more from you, because if you see yourself being in a very successful position, maybe you are in a C-suite position in a corporate job, or you're a successful entrepreneur where you have a staff, a team of people who work for you, you are going to be in a position of leadership. Or even if it's content creation and you have a bunch of followers, you are in a position of leadership, right? You are that authority in that space. You have all of these people looking up to you. It's a responsibility. I used to think that when people would say certain things to celebrities, like, oh, you can't do this because the children are looking at you and blah, blah. And I used to be like, these people are not raising your children, right? Now, I still believe that to some extent, because while they will be held to a high standard because they have a platform, at the same time, you are the one responsible for raising your children, okay? And controlling what they see and what they don't see, okay? So that part, I believe. But at the same time, I now understand why people are being held to a certain standard. Now, you can't please everybody, right? At the end of the day, you should strive to please God, and that's it, because He's the one who controls the outcome of things. He's the one that gives you peace, not anybody else. So it's not about trying to make everybody happy, but if God is calling you to do something where you have a platform or you're in a position of leadership, you have to act with integrity and respect for that position, for that calling. It requires more from you. So, yes, other people around you might be moving funny. They might be moving sideways. They might be conducting themselves in a certain way. That's none of your business, because they have a different calling. If you know you are supposed to be in a position of leadership, if you are supposed to have influence or whatever, you have to move differently. It requires more from you. Stop looking at other people. Stop trying to bring other people with you. Honor the position that God has given you. Act with integrity and act in alignment with that, okay? But just because the people around you are doing some foolishness, that does not mean you can do the same foolishness too, okay? Because you will be the one that is made an example out of, okay? You will be the one that's made an example of. Those Israelites could have been as disobedient as they want. They had Moses to plead on their behalf. They weren't called to leadership. They weren't called to lead anybody, okay? Because as I continue to read, I see how they just live life according to their ways and their understanding, and doing whatever they want until they need God for something, which sounds like a lot of us, and I've been there myself, okay? But they were not the ones that were called to leadership. Moses was. So Moses had to act with integrity for that calling, for that position. Just because they wanted to do some foolery and lose faith and question God and go on and go off about nonsense, that does not mean he had the right to act the way he did, because he was the one with the calling on his life, not them. And that goes back to the point of, getting rid of people, or not trying to force people to come with you to your promised land. They could be acting foolish. and they could influence you into acting foolish. They could, like, there have been so many instances that I've seen online with celebrities or these NBA players where you are now a millionaire, you are now a multimillionaire, you have a successful career, you have a certain, people are holding you to high standards. You have to maintain a certain image because your brand is not your own, right? You represent the NFL or the NBA, or the teams that pay you, right? And then they go around their friends, and these friends lead them into stuff on the other side of the law, drugs, alcohol, guns, violence, etc. And then they record it, and boom, your career is over. And people are saying, oh, well, that's not why be so hard on them because of that and blah, blah, blah. It's because the calling was on you. It was never on them. They have nothing to lose. So it doesn't matter if they do it, but you cannot do it. You cannot do it. They can do it, but you cannot do it. The calling is on your life. You have to act in alignment with that. And if people around you are not respecting that, if they keep trying to bring out a certain side of you that even though maybe, yes, you were that person, but now you don't want to be that person, you need to put some distance in between you and them, because there will be no consequences for their actions, but all of the consequences will fall on you. You risk everything. You risk your promised land and your destiny, so to speak, trying to do some foolishness with people who have nothing to lose. Okay? So your destiny requires more from you. Other people might be able to do it, but you can't. You are not other people. Okay? You are not other people. Don't get it twisted. Now, I just realized I didn't even say my little hello. So hello. Hello. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Sensi, and we talk about accountability and being the best version of yourself. Okay? But that intro was a lot longer than I anticipated it. I just had to go off on that rant because that sermon really did something to me. Okay? This wasn't even planned, but it just came out. But with all of that in mind, I have been really trying to, hold myself accountable to my character and, what I know I'm called to do, like offline, not just online, not just on the podcast. Like, I can come here and talk about all of these things, but I want you to know that I also hold myself accountable to it. For one, I talk about things that I've experienced myself, things that I've been through, things that I've learned from. And I also share things that I'm currently learning, I'm in the process of working on. I never portray perfection, only transparency, but I also hold myself accountable when I know I'm acting out of alignment. And I try to do that not just because I have a podcast, but simply just to have to honor what God has called me to do, basically. Like, I may not be there yet, but my character and my integrity and my discipline and all of these things still matter where I'm at today, right? So that's something I always consider, that's something I always try to do, and I do not get it right. I do not get it right all the time. I do not get it right all the time. Okay, sometimes he's still working on me. He is still working on me. But I'm saying this because I don't want you to just think about it in terms of me. I want you to think about it in terms of you. You know what you are called to do. Even if your life does not look anything like the promised land that God promised you, even if you do not have the tangible things, even if you do not see the stats and the metrics, even if your bank account doesn't reflect it, what you can do today, and we're talking about being the best version of yourself, what you can do today is start acting in alignment with that person in terms of their character and their integrity and how they treat people. Okay? What you can do today is practice self-control, because if you have a dream to be, I don't know, the next president of the United States or to be in politics, I don't know about you, I've seen scandal, And if there is one thing I know is that when you are a politician, people will dig up all the way back to your childhood to try to disqualify you for a position. Like people play dirty, right? So that's just an example. It may not be politics, but whatever it is, if you, for example, the example of politics, if you know you want to be a prime minister or a politician, and you see that happening for you when you're, I don't know, 38 years old, and right now you're 24 or you're 25, think about how you live your life up to that point, because you don't want to do crazy things that will give people ammunition on you. You don't want to act out of alignment. Now, nobody is perfect, and sometimes these things happen, and you can learn from it. Absolutely, you can learn from it. So if some things have already happened that you're not too proud of, you are forgiven. You are covered by the blood, first of all. But you can always learn from that. And you have to own it too. That's the thing, is when people try to hide certain things and run from it and act like it didn't happen, that's when people have the ammunition on you. And that's why I made a whole episode talking about own your truth, right? I'm not hiding nothing. I'm not hiding nothing. I can own everything. But that's another story. Go listen to that episode. But today, if you know there is a calling on your life to be a president, a prime minister, a politician, whatever it is, you owe it to yourself to start developing the character and the integrity of that calling today. Let it be practiced until you get there, right? Act like you have some sense. If you know there's more, if you know there's a higher calling on your life, you have to start acting like it today. And you need to check the people around you too. Check the people around you, because not everybody wants the best for you. Some people, they love trauma bonding with you. They love hearing about your downfalls, your losses. They love when you feel relatable to them. But as soon as you start doing better, they have a problem with it. Now they're not as close to you. Now they just want to monitor you, but they're not pouring into you. You will feel it. And it will happen. It happens with a lot of people. A lot of people get backstabbed, etc., etc. So you have to check the people around you too. When you start changing, when you start thinking, okay, I know there's a higher calling on my life, let me act better, be mindful of how the people around you respond to that as well. Because the people around you should be encouraging you, or they should be growing with you at a similar rate, at a similar pace. They should also be invested in being the best version of themselves. And if they are not, if you see people starting to move funny around you, you better not act like Moses. You better not act like Moses and go and run and pray to God to keep people in your life. You better not do it. You better be serious about yourself. Because if you ever need confirmation, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the people in your past that you have prayed for God to keep them in your life. And now you are so grateful that they are not there. You are so grateful that God had better plans. You're so grateful that He did not listen to you. Just think about that. Think about how much you wanted them to stay. And then think about how grateful you are now that they are not in your life. Listen, if I could speak in tongues, I would. If I could speak in tongues, I would, because thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus, that He had better plans. Thank you that He saw what was about to happen and He removed me from that situation. Now, I want you to think about it that way, because when you start acting in alignment with the best version of yourself, with the calling on your life, some people are going to switch up on you. Some people are going to be funny. Some people are going to be real funny, okay? But you cannot let that get to you. You cannot let that get to you, and you better not go and ask God to make them stay. If anything, pray the prayer that God answers within 24 minutes. Not even 24 hours, within 24 minutes. God, if this person is not for me, remove them. If they don't have pure intentions for me, reveal it. That's one prayer that God delivers overnight, express, next day shipping, immediately. Immediately, he will answer it. If anything, that's the prayer you should be praying. Not, no, God, please change them. Please make them stay. This, and that. Do you want to wait 40 years? Do you want to wait 40 years for your promised land? Do you want to be like the Israelites and wait 40 years? Or do you want to be like Moses and be in a position of leadership, be in a position where you are called to do more, and then you pray to keep people around you that are not meant to stay, and because they trigger you, you act out of alignment and you disqualify yourself? I didn't think so. So set those boundaries and pay attention to how the people around you are, and be cautious, okay? Be cautious when you are being told that it is time to let people go. Be cautious. Trust your intuition. Trust your intuition the first time. I said that. I made a whole episode about that, and I listed it as one of the 27 things I've learned in the last episode. Trust your intuition. If you are receiving warning signs about people, trust it. One thing about me, let me tell you, one thing about me, I used to think I was crazy, but sometimes it's like before people ever start switching up on me, I'll receive like a warning, like in a dream or something. But I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I'm telling you, trust your intuition and be cautious about people when you are feeling, some resistance, some tension, etc. Set those boundaries, and don't you dare go to God and ask him to make people change so they can stay. Do not try to keep anybody around that will cost you your promised land. More is required from you, and you need to be around people who encourage you to do more, to be more, people who hold you accountable, and who remind you that you are blessed, you are called to do better, you are called to be more, and not the people who want to constantly keep you tied to that old version of you, those old habits, those old things you used to do that you're trying not to do. Be very mindful of that, okay? Now, a few episodes that will build on this concept and really help you evaluate your life are episode 130, Who Are You When No One Is Looking? Episode 29, What No One Tells You About Leveling Up? Episode 101, Give Yourself Some Grace While You Grow, okay? Because you're not going to get it right the first time, okay? You need to give yourself some grace. And then number 126, Hold Yourself to a High Standard, okay? And you know what? Also, I don't have this one listed, but it's a bonus. I don't remember what number it is, but I will have it in the description and on the screen. But it's the one about moving in silence, okay? Move in silence, because you never know. You never know. You never know. It's time to be quiet. But yeah, that is all I have to say today. If you liked this episode, please like the video. If you ever want to listen to any of the episodes on audio only, maybe you're driving, you can't watch the video, then you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and listen to the audio versions of the podcast. If you're already listening there, thank you. I love you. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and a written review on those apps. Thank you. And yeah, if this episode spoke to you, please leave a comment on YouTube and let me know. And that is all I have to say today, and I will talk to you next Sunday.